The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare buzzed overhead as Nina Hartley speedwalked through Terminal 3, her rolling suitcase clicking against every crack in the polished floor. Her scrubs were still tucked into her oversized purse, remnants of the 12-hour shift she had just escaped from Children's Memorial Hospital. Every bone in her body felt heavy, like gravity had decided to press down harder on her shoulders specifically. She glanced at her phone screen. The boarding pass glowed back at her. Gate 18. Flight to Los Angeles departing in 15 minutes. Her best friend Claire was getting married this weekend, and Nina had promised 2 years ago that nothing would keep her away. Not the hospital. Not her responsibilities. Not even the constant exhaustion that had become her normal state. Gate 10. Gate 12. The numbers blurred together as she walked faster. Her mind was still back in the pediatric ward with little Mateo, the 6-year-old who had finally smiled after 3 days of fighting pneumonia. She had held his small hand until his fever broke, staying 2 hours past her shift because his mother was stuck at work and someone needed to be there when he woke up. Gate 14. Gate 16. Almost there. Nina's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Did you remember to pick up my prescription? The pharmacy closes at 6. Her heart sank. She had forgotten. Again. Between the emergency admission last night and the staff meeting this morning, her mother's medication had completely slipped her mind. She typed back quickly. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'll call the pharmacy and have it delivered. I'm about to board my flight. Another text came through immediately. It's fine, sweetheart. You work too hard. Have fun at the wedding. You deserve a break. The guilt settled in Nina's stomach like a stone. For 3 years, since her father passed away suddenly from a heart attack, she had been splitting herself between caring for her mother, who struggled with chronic pain, and her demanding job at the hospital. Somewhere along the way, she had forgotten what it felt like to not be tired. Gate 20. Gate 22. Wait. Nina stopped walking and stared at the gate number. Gate 23. That was not right. She pulled out her phone again, squinting at the boarding pass through eyes that desperately wanted to close. Gate 18, it clearly said. But her exhausted brain had somehow guided her feet to Gate 23 instead. Before she could turn around, a woman in an elegant navy uniform appeared beside her. Miss Bennett, we were starting to worry you might miss the flight. I'm not Miss Bennett, Nina started to say, but the woman was already reaching for her bag. Mr. Sterling asked us to expedite your boarding, the woman continued with a warm smile. He's already on board and anxious to depart. Right this way, please. Nina's brain, foggy from lack of sleep, could not quite process what was happening fast enough. Maybe this was some kind of upgrade. Maybe Claire had arranged something special as a thank you for being her maid of honor. The thoughts swirled slowly through her mind like honey. Before she could form a proper protest, she was being guided down the jetway. Her feet moved automatically, following the uniformed woman. Something felt wrong, but the words to stop it would not come. She was so tired. So incredibly tired. Then she stepped through the airplane door and her breath caught in her throat. This was not a commercial aircraft. Buttery leather seats lined both sides of a cabin that looked more like a luxury living room than a plane. Soft amber lighting cast a warm glow over polished wood accents. A full galley kitchen gleamed in stainless steel. Through an open door, she could see what appeared to be an actual bedroom. Sitting in one of the massive seats, laptop open on the table in front of him, was a man who looked up at her entrance. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, with dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead and sharp green eyes that registered immediate surprise. "You're not Vanessa," he said. His voice was deep and carried an accent she could not quite place. "No," Nina replied, suddenly feeling very awake. "I'm Nina Hartley, and I think I just made a terrible mistake." The door sealed shut behind her with an ominous thunk. The man closed his laptop slowly, studying her with an expression that seemed equal parts confused and intrigued. "I'm Callum Sterling. And yes, I believe you have indeed made a mistake. My assistant booked this flight for myself and my business associate, Vanessa Bennett." "I need to get off," Nina said, panic rising in her chest like a wave. "I'm supposed to be on a flight to Los Angeles. My best friend is getting married. I'm the maid of honor. This cannot be happening." The engines began to hum, a low vibration that Nina felt through the soles of her sneakers. Callum stood up, and Nina noticed he was tall, probably over 6 feet. He moved toward her with an easy grace. "I'm afraid we've already been cleared for takeoff. The tower doesn't allow deplaning once we've begun taxi procedures." "Where is this plane going?" Nina demanded, though part of her already knew the answer would not be California. "Paris," Callum said simply. "We have a 9-hour flight ahead of us." The plane began to move, rolling away from the gate. "Paris," Nina repeated, the word feeling foreign in her mouth. "Paris, France. Across the Atlantic Ocean. Paris. Is there another Paris you know of? This cannot be real." Nina sank into the nearest seat because her legs suddenly felt like they might give out. "I don't even have the right clothes for Paris. I have a bridesmaid dress and a pair of jeans. I cannot miss this wedding. Claire will never forgive me." Callum returned to his seat across from her, and Nina noticed his eyes were kind despite the awkward situation. "I can assure you the moment we land in Paris, I will personally arrange for your immediate return flight to Los Angeles. First class on any airline you prefer. This is clearly my staff's error for mistaking you for Vanessa. Do I look like a business associate?" Nina gestured to her worn jeans and faded Northwestern University sweatshirt. His lips twitched slightly. "You look exhausted, to be honest. When did you last sleep properly?" 48 hours ago, Nina admitted. "We had an emergency in the pediatric ICU. A teenage girl with complications from surgery. I stayed with her family because they were terrified and the regular counselor was out sick. Then my regular shift started, and I couldn't exactly leave the kids." The plane lifted off smoothly, and Nina watched through the window as Chicago grew smaller beneath them. Somewhere down there, Claire was probably wondering why she had not checked in yet. Somewhere down there, her mother was trying to figure out how to get her medication. And here she was, flying to Paris on a private jet with a complete stranger. "You're a pediatric nurse," Callum said. It was not a question. "At Children's Memorial. 3 years now. That must be incredibly demanding work." Nina laughed, but it came out tired. "That's one way to put it. Heartbreaking, exhausting, and somehow the most important thing I've ever done. All at the same time." A flight attendant appeared, a young man with kind eyes. "May I offer you something to drink? Perhaps some food? We have a lovely menu prepared." Nina realized she had not eaten since yesterday's lunch. Her stomach growled in response. "Just water, please." "Bring her the salmon," Callum said gently. "And the fruit. She needs proper food." After the attendant left, Nina looked at Callum more carefully. His suit probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. His watch was definitely worth more than her car. But his eyes held something familiar. A certain weariness that expensive things could not hide. "I really am sorry about this," she said quietly. "You were probably looking forward to your trip with Vanessa." Something flickered across Callum's face. "Vanessa and I have a business relationship. This trip was meant to finalize a merger. Nothing personal. Still. I crashed your flight." "Perhaps," Callum said, and his expression softened into something almost like a smile. "Or perhaps you've made it more interesting." As the plane climbed higher into the night sky, Nina felt the last of her resistance fade. She was going to Paris. There was nothing she could do about it now except trust that this stranger would keep his word about getting her home. "Tell me about the wedding," Callum said, settling back in his seat. "Your friend Claire." And because she was tired, because she was trapped on a plane for 9 hours, and because something about Callum's voice made her feel safe, Nina began to talk. She told him about meeting Claire their freshman year of college, about late-night study sessions and shared dreams. She told him about Claire's fiancé Tom, who proposed with a ring made from a twist tie because the real one had not arrived yet and he could not wait another moment. Callum listened, really listened, in a way Nina had not experienced in years. And slowly, somewhere over the dark Atlantic Ocean, the worst mistake of her life began to feel like something else entirely. Something that might just change everything. The salmon arrived on fine china, perfectly cooked and garnished with herbs Nina could not name. She ate slowly, savoring each bite while Callum worked quietly on his laptop across from her. The cabin was peaceful, with only the steady hum of engines breaking the silence. After she finished eating, Nina felt more human than she had in days. The food and the comfortable seat were working magic on her exhausted body. She pulled out her phone, intending to text Claire an explanation, but there was no signal at this altitude. "We have Wi-Fi," Callum said without looking up from his screen. "The password is written on that card by your seat." Nina connected and immediately sent a message to Claire. "You won't believe what happened. Accidentally got on wrong plane. Flying to Paris. I know this sounds insane. We'll explain everything. So sorry. We'll be back for wedding, I promise." Claire's response came within seconds. "What? Paris? Are you serious? Are you okay? Should I call someone?" "I'm fine. Long story. Talk soon." Next, she texted her mother with a simplified version. Her mother's reply was surprisingly calm. "These things happen when you're running on no sleep, sweetheart. Be safe. Send pictures of Paris." Nina looked up to find Callum watching her. He closed his laptop. "Everything sorted? My friend thinks I've lost my mind. My mother is being understanding, which somehow makes me feel worse." Nina tucked her phone away. "I still cannot believe this is happening. Life has a strange way of intervening sometimes," Callum said. He stood and moved to the bar area, returning with 2 glasses and a bottle of red wine. "This is a 2015 Bordeaux. Nothing fixes an impossible situation quite like good wine." "I probably should not," Nina said, but she accepted the glass anyway. "I'm already making questionable decisions tonight." To questionable decisions, Callum raised his glass. "May they lead somewhere unexpected." The wine was smooth and rich, warming Nina from the inside. She settled deeper into her seat, which was more comfortable than her bed at home. "So, Callum Sterling. What kind of business requires a private jet to Paris?" "The kind that started in a garage and somehow turned into something much larger than I ever imagined," he said. "I developed software for hospital systems. Programs that help coordinate patient care, reduce medication errors, track vital signs across departments." Nina sat up straighter. "Wait. Sterling Health Systems? That's your company? You've heard of it? We use your software at Children's Memorial. The nurses love it. The old system was a nightmare, but yours actually makes sense. It saves lives, honestly." Callum's expression brightened in a way that made him look younger. "That means more to me than you can imagine. When I started the company, my little sister Emma was sick. Leukemia. She was only 14. Nina's chest tightened. "Was? She passed away 6 years ago." Callum stared into his wine. The hospital where she was treated had so many problems with their systems. Medications delayed because of computer errors. Test results lost in digital filing. I watched my parents fight with machines when they should have been holding Emma's hand. I'm so sorry, Nina said softly, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. She knew that particular kind of loss, the one that carved holes in your life that never quite filled in. After she died, I dropped out of business school and taught myself coding. Emma always said she wanted to help other kids. This felt like a way to honor that. Callum took a long drink of his wine. I built the first version in my parents' garage. Pitched it to one hospital. They rejected it. Then another. And another. Took 2 years before someone gave me a chance. And now hospitals across the country use it, Nina said. Across several countries, actually. The Paris trip is to finalize a deal with a European hospital network. He paused. Or it was. Vanessa handles the international contracts. Without her, the meeting will be complicated. Nina felt a fresh wave of guilt. I really did ruin your trip. You know what Emma used to say? Callum's voice grew soft. She said the universe has a plan, even when we cannot see it. When she was first diagnosed, she told my parents it happened for a reason. That maybe her sickness would lead to something that helped others. He looked directly at Nina. I stopped believing that after she died. But sitting here with you, hearing that my work actually helps nurses like you care for kids like her, maybe she was right. Nina felt tears prick her eyes. She sounds like she was amazing. She was. Funny, brave, stubborn as anything. Callum smiled at the memory. She refused to let cancer make her boring. Wore ridiculous wigs to chemo. Bright pink, neon green. Once she wore a rainbow one and told the other kids in the ward she was a superhero whose power was making doctors laugh. I have patients like that, Nina said. The ones who light up the whole floor even when they feel terrible. They're my favorite. Tell me about them. So Nina did. She told him about Matteo, who drew pictures for all the nurses. About 7-year-old Jade, who made up songs about her 4-pole and named it Gerald. About teenage Marcus, who was terrified of needles but never complained because he did not want to seem weak in front of his little brother. Callum listened with the same intense focus he had given her earlier, and Nina realized how rare this was. Most people heard her stories and looked uncomfortable. They did not know what to do with the sadness and the hope mixed together. Why nursing? Callum asked. Specifically pediatrics? Nina was quiet for a moment, deciding how much to share. The wine and the altitude and the surreal nature of this entire situation loosened something in her chest. My dad died suddenly 3 years ago. Heart attack at 52. He was perfectly healthy one day, gone the next. The words came out steady, even though the memory still ached. He was a carpenter. Built beautiful things with his hands. Our whole house is full of furniture he made. That must have been devastating. It broke something in my mom. She already had chronic back pain from an accident years ago, but after Dad died, it got worse. Depression, the doctors said. Pain and grief feeding each other. Nina twisted her wine glass between her hands. I was finishing nursing school when it happened. I had plans to move to Seattle, work in research, see the country. But Mom needed help. Someone to make sure she took her medication, went to her appointments, did not give up. So you stayed, Callum said. So I stayed. Got the job at Children's Memorial because it paid well and had good insurance that covered Mom too. Put Seattle on hold. Put everything on hold, really. Nina took another sip of wine. I don't regret it. Mom is my family. But sometimes I look at my life and wonder where I went. The girl who wanted adventures and new experiences. She disappeared somewhere between medication schedules and hospital shifts. She's still there, Callum said quietly. She's sitting on a plane to Paris right now. Nina laughed despite herself. By accident. Does it matter how you got here? They talked for hours after that. Callum told her about growing up in Boston, about his parents who still worked normal jobs despite his success because they did not trust computer money to last. He told her about learning to sail with his father and Emma, about the boat they had named the Unsinkable too, because Emma insisted she would never sink, metaphorically speaking. Nina shared stories about her childhood in a small town in Wisconsin, about summer nights catching fireflies with her dad, about her mother teaching her to bake bread from scratch every Sunday. She talked about college, about the terror and excitement of moving to Chicago, about the moment she held her first patient's hand and knew she had found her calling. "Do you ever date?" Callum asked suddenly, then looked embarrassed. "Sorry, that was too personal." "No, it's fine." "And no, I don't. No time, mostly. The hospital, my mom, trying to have some kind of life. Dating feels like another responsibility I cannot handle." Nina felt her cheeks warm. "What about you? Besides business associates you bring to Paris?" "Vanessa is not a girlfriend," Callum clarified quickly. "We have a professional relationship that sometimes extends to company events. Nothing romantic." "But you date?" "Rarely. And never seriously." Callum's jaw tightened slightly. After Emma died, after building the company became everything, relationships felt complicated. Women interested in the money, not the person. Or wanting me to be someone I'm not. Someone without grief. Without work that matters more than fancy dinners. "That sounds lonely," Nina observed. "It is," Callum admitted. "Very lonely. I have friends, colleagues, family. But that deeper connection, someone who understands why I do what I do, why I cannot just relax and enjoy success. That's been missing." Their eyes met across the small space, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Two people who had built walls around wounded hearts, who had chosen duty over desire for so long they forgot there was another option. The flight attendant returned to check on them. "We're about 4 hours from Paris. Would either of you like to rest? The bedroom is available, Miss Hartley, if you would like proper sleep." Nina glanced at Callum. "I don't want to impose." "Please, use it. You said yourself you have not slept in 2 days. You'll need rest if you're flying back to Los Angeles tomorrow." Callum's voice was gentle but firm. "I have work to finish anyway." The bedroom was small but luxurious, with a real bed covered in soft linens. Nina lay down fully clothed, intending to rest for just a few minutes. Instead, she fell into deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke, the flight attendant was gently shaking her shoulder. "Miss Hartley, we'll be landing in 30 minutes." Nina sat up, disoriented. Through the small window, she could see the sun rising over unfamiliar landscape. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then everything came rushing back. She was going to Paris. She returned to the main cabin to find Callum staring out his window, coffee in hand. He looked tired, like he had not slept at all. "Morning," he said when he saw her. "Coffee? Please." Nina accepted the cup and sat down. "Did you sleep at all?" "No. I was thinking." "About the meeting?" "About you, actually." Callum turned to face her fully. "Nina, I know I promised to put you on the first flight back to Los Angeles. And I will, if that's what you want. But I have a different proposal." Nina's heart began to beat faster. "You have until Sunday afternoon for the wedding, correct? Today is Friday. What if you stayed? Just for today. Let me show you Paris. Consider it an apology for this entire mess. Then tomorrow morning, I'll make sure you're on a direct flight with plenty of time." Every practical bone in Nina's body screamed no. She should go home immediately. Call Claire, reassure her mother, return to real life. But something else whispered yes. something that had been silent for 3 years. One day in Paris, Nina heard herself say. Then home. Callum's smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. One day in Paris. As the plane began its descent, Nina looked out at the city spreading below them. The Eiffel Tower rose in the distance, and the Seine wound through ancient streets like a silver ribbon. She was going to Paris with a man she had just met. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt truly, completely alive. The private car that picked them up from the airport was sleek and black, gliding through Paris streets that seemed to glow in the early morning light. Nina pressed her face to the window like a child, watching as centuries-old buildings passed by in shades of cream and gray. Cafes were just opening their doors, setting out small round tables on sidewalks still damp with dew. It's more beautiful than pictures, she whispered. Callum sat beside her, closer than necessary in the spacious back seat. Pictures never do it justice. Paris has to be felt, not just seen. The hotel was tucked away on a quiet street in the 6th arrondissement. Not one of the grand famous hotels, but something smaller, more intimate. The lobby smelled of fresh flowers and old books. Callum spoke to the manager in flawless French, his voice flowing easily through words Nina barely recognized. "You speak French," she said, surprised. "I lived here for a year after Emma died. Needed to escape everything familiar. Paris felt far enough away." He collected 2 key cards from the desk. "I had them prepare a suite for you. Your flight back is booked for tomorrow at 10 in the morning, which gives you plenty of time to reach Los Angeles before the wedding." "Thank you," Nina said, meaning it for everything. The flight home, this strange kindness, the way he had listened to her story without judgment. "Meet me in the lobby in an hour," Callum said. "Wear comfortable shoes. We have a lot of ground to cover." Nina's suite was small but perfect, with tall windows overlooking a courtyard where someone was playing piano. She showered quickly, washing away the plane journey and her exhaustion. Among her limited clothing options, she chose the nicest jeans she had packed and a simple blue sweater. Looking at herself in the ornate mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. When had she last done something spontaneous? When had she last felt this flutter of anticipation? Her phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Tell me everything when you can. Also, you're insane. Also, I love you. Also, if he's cute, I want details." Nina smiled and tucked the phone away. Callum was waiting in the lobby, changed into dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his green eyes even more striking. He held 2 paper cups of coffee. "Breakfast first. I know a place." The cafe was a tiny corner spot where an elderly man with a magnificent white mustache greeted Callum with enthusiastic French and vigorous handshakes. They sat at a marble-top table barely big enough for 2 plates, and the man brought them croissants that flaked apart like clouds and jam that tasted like concentrated summer. "This is Henri," Callum explained. "When I lived here, I came to his cafe every morning. He taught me that good coffee and good bread solve most of life's problems." Henri said something in rapid French, gesturing at Nina with a knowing smile. "What did he say?" Nina asked. Callum's ears turned slightly pink. "He said you're much prettier than the last woman I brought here. And he approves." "You brought Vanessa here?" "No. I brought someone else, years ago. It didn't work out." Callum changed the subject quickly. "What do you want to see? The Eiffel Tower? The Louvre? Notre Dame?" Nina thought about it, tearing off a piece of croissant. "Show me your Paris. The one you lived in. Not the tourist version." Something shifted in Callum's expression, a wall coming down. "Deal." They walked. Miles and miles through neighborhoods that felt more like villages than parts of a major city. Callum led her down narrow streets lined with bookshops and art galleries, past markets where vendors called out prices for vegetables and cheese. They stopped at a fountain where children sailed toy boats, and Callum bought her one, a small wooden sailboat with red sails. "For your nephew," he said. "Or niece?" "No nibblings yet. Claire is the first of my friends getting married." Nina held the boat carefully. "This is perfect though. I have a patient who would love it. Little girl named Sophie who's obsessed with boats." "The things you remember about your patients," Callum said softly. "Their names, their likes. That's what makes you good at what you do." They found themselves at Shakespeare and Company, the famous English bookstore perched beside the Seine. Inside, it smelled like old paper and possibility. Books climbed to the ceiling in chaotic towers. A cat slept in a sunny window. Nina could have stayed for hours, running her fingers along worn spines, reading first lines of novels. "Emma loved this place," Callum said, standing in the poetry section. "She made me read her poems whenever we visited. Said poetry was how people told the truth when regular words failed them." Nina pulled a slim volume from the shelf. Pablo Neruda. She opened it randomly and read aloud. "I want to do with you what spring does with the cherry trees." The words hung in the air between them. Callum looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Emma would have liked you," he said quietly. "She always wanted me to find someone real. Someone who understood that money doesn't fix the important things." They bought books. Nina chose a collection of short stories about Paris, and Callum selected a volume of poetry for reasons he did not explain. Outside, they walked along the Seine, watching tourist boats glide past and artists set up easels on the bridges. "Tell me something nobody knows about you," Callum said suddenly. Nina considered the question. "I sing to my patients. The little ones who can't sleep. Old lullabies my dad used to sing to me. My co-workers think it's silly. It's not silly. It's beautiful." Callum stopped walking, turning to face her. "I talk to Emma still. Out loud, when I'm alone. Tell her about the company, about deals we close, about the hospitals using our software. Sometimes I imagine what advice she'd give me. What would she say about this? About me being here? She'd say I'm an idiot if I let you get on that plane tomorrow without telling you how much I've enjoyed these last 12 hours. The honesty in his voice made Nina's heart race. She'd say life is too short to be practical all the time. They kept walking, but something had shifted. Their hands brushed accidentally, then not so accidentally. By the time they reached the Luxembourg Gardens, their fingers were intertwined. The gardens were magnificent, full of flowers and fountains and Parisians enjoying the mild day. They sat on metal chairs beside the central pond, watching children push toy sailboats with long sticks. "I haven't held someone's hand in 3 years," Nina admitted. "Not like this." "I haven't wanted to in longer than that," Callum replied. An old woman selling flowers approached them, speaking musical French. Callum bought a single white rose and handed it to Nina. "She says we look like we're falling in love." "Do we?" Nina's voice came out as a whisper. "I don't know. Is it possible to fall in love in one day?" "My parents fell in love in 3 hours," Nina said. "They met at a bus stop in a rainstorm. My dad offered my mom his umbrella. By the time the bus came, he had asked her to dinner. They were married 6 months later. And they were happy? Deliriously. Right up until the end." Nina touched the rose petals softly. "My mom still talks to his picture every night before bed. Tells him about her day like he's sitting right there. That's the kind of love worth having," Callum said. "The kind that doesn't end just because someone is gone." They had lunch at a tiny restaurant where the owner knew Callum by name and brought them dishes they had not ordered. Everything was delicious. They shared a carafe of wine and talked about dreams they had forgotten. Nina admitted she had always wanted to learn piano. Callum confessed he wrote terrible poetry that would never see the light of day. Read me one, Nina challenged. Absolutely not. Come on. I sang you one of my lullabies. You did not sing me anything. Because we're in public. But I would if we weren't. Callum laughed, and Nina realized it was the first time she had heard him laugh freely. The sound was wonderful, warm and genuine. Fine. But you cannot mock me. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through notes. This is from last year. I was in Tokyo, couldn't sleep, and this came out. He read softly. The city lights are stars that fell too close to Earth. They burn without warmth, bright without beauty. I walk among them, a ghost in an expensive suit, searching for something that remembers how to shine. Nina's throat tightened. That's not terrible. That's heartbreaking. That's what loneliness looks like at 3 in the morning in a hotel room halfway around the world. Callum put his phone away. But sitting here with you, I can't remember what that felt like. The afternoon drifted into evening. They walked through Montmartre, climbing the steps to Sacré-Cœur. From the top, Paris spread out below them in golden light. The Eiffel Tower stood in the distance, and the city hummed with life. I should hate you a little, Nina said, not looking away from the view. For being rich enough to have a private jet. For having freedom I'll never have. For making me want things I gave up on. Do you? Hate me? No. I think I might be doing the opposite of that. Nina finally turned to look at him. Which terrifies me because I get on a plane tomorrow and go back to my real life. Back to hospitals and medication schedules and being responsible. This isn't real. Why can't it be? Callum moved closer. Nina, I know this is fast. I know it's crazy. But I felt more alive today walking through Paris with you than I have in 6 years. Since before Emma died. You make me remember there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins. And you make me remember I'm 29 years old, not 50. That I'm allowed to want things for myself. Nina's eyes filled with tears. But I can't abandon my mom. I can't just run off to Paris or wherever with some man I met yesterday, no matter how wonderful he is. I'm not asking you to abandon anyone. I'm asking you to consider that maybe, just maybe, you could have both. A life that includes taking care of your mother and also taking care of yourself. How? You live in, where, Boston? I live in Chicago. You travel constantly for business. I work 60-hour weeks. The logistics alone are impossible. My company has an office in Chicago, Callum said. I could work from there. Or you could consider that job offer in Seattle. Your mom could come with you. I'd help. Not because of money, but because I want you to have the life you deserve. Nina shook her head, even as her heart pulled toward the possibility. This is insane. 24 hours ago, I didn't know you existed. 24 hours ago, I was flying to Paris with someone I barely cared about for a business meeting I was dreading. Now I'm standing here with you, and I don't want this day to end. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Around them, other couples watched the view, taking pictures, stealing kisses. Nina felt suspended between two worlds. The practical one where she was needed, where responsibility waited. And this one, where a man she barely knew looked at her like she was the most important person in Paris. Tell me what you're thinking, Callum said. I'm thinking that my dad used to say the biggest regrets in life aren't the things you do, but the things you don't do. The chances you don't take. Nina took a shaky breath. I'm thinking that tomorrow I get on a plane and go back to Chicago, and I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what if. So don't, Callum said simply. Don't get on the plane wondering. Get on the plane knowing. Knowing what? That this isn't the end. That I'm going to call you every day. That I'm going to visit Chicago. That I'm going to prove to you that logistics don't matter when two people genuinely care about each other. You care about me? After one day? Nina, I haven't stopped thinking about you since you walked onto my plane looking exhausted and terrified. I haven't stopped wanting to know everything about you. Your favorite color, your childhood memories, what makes you laugh, what makes you cry. One day, 1 week, 1 month, does it matter? I know enough to know I want more. Nina felt something break open inside her chest. 3 years of holding everything together, of being strong, of putting everyone else first. 3 years of forgetting she was allowed to want things too. Blue, she whispered. My favorite color is blue. Like the ocean I've never seen in person. Like the scrubs I wear that make little kids feel safe. Like your eyes right now in this light. Callum smiled. My favorite color is whatever you're wearing. Today it's been blue. Tomorrow it will be something else. But it will always be on you. That's the cheesiest thing I've ever heard, Nina said, but she was smiling through tears. I warned you my poetry was terrible. They stood there as the sun finished setting, as lights began to twinkle across Paris, as the city transformed from day to night. And when Callum leaned down to kiss her, gentle and questioning, Nina kissed him back with all the hope she had been holding in her heart. I'm still getting on that plane tomorrow, she said when they finally pulled apart. I know. And this might not work. Long distance is hard. Our lives are complicated. I know. But I want to try, Nina finished. I want to see if maybe, just maybe, boarding the wrong plane was the rightest thing I've ever done. Callum pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as Paris glittered below them. Emma used to say the universe has a plan. I think I finally believe her. They had dinner at a small bistro where candles flickered on tables and accordion music played softly. They talked about logistics, about real plans. Callum would come to Chicago in 2 weeks. Nina would introduce him to her mother, to her world. They would take it slow, figure it out step by step. But they both knew the truth. Sometimes hearts know what minds take months to accept. Sometimes one day is enough to change everything. Walking back to the hotel through midnight streets, Nina felt different. Lighter. Like she had set down a burden she did not know she was carrying. Tomorrow she would fly home, stand beside Claire at the altar, return to her hospital shifts and her responsibilities. But she would return as someone new. Someone who remembered how to hope. At her hotel room door, Callum kissed her goodnight properly, thoroughly, in a way that promised more tomorrows. Thank you, Nina whispered against his lips. For Paris. For today. For everything. Thank you for boarding the wrong plane, Callum replied. Best mistake anyone ever made. Nina fell asleep that night with a white rose on her pillow and a wooden sailboat on the nightstand. Outside her window, Paris hummed with life. And somewhere in the universe, maybe Emma Sterling smiled, knowing her brother had finally found someone real. The next morning, Callum took Nina to the airport personally. They held hands in the back seat, neither speaking much, both feeling the weight of goodbye. At the departure's gate, he pulled her close one more time. 2 weeks, he promised. 2 weeks, she agreed. Nina walked through security and turned back once. Callum stood there watching, and even from a distance, she could see he was smiling. On the flight home, Nina looked through the photos on her phone. The bookstore, the gardens, the sunset from Sacré-Cœur. But her favorite was the one a passing tourist had taken of them. Sitting by the fountain, holding hands, looking at each other like they held the whole world. She sent it to Claire with a message. Met someone. Long story. See you tomorrow. P.S. You were right. He's very cute. 3 months later, Nina stood in her mother's kitchen in Chicago, making Sunday bread while Callum sat at the table charming her mother with stories. He had kept his promise, visiting every other weekend, calling every night. Slowly, impossibly, they were building something real. "He's good for you," her mother said quietly when Callum stepped out to take a business call. "You smile again. Really smile." "I love him, Mom," Nina admitted. "I know it's fast. Your father and I fell in love at a bus stop in 3 hours. Fast doesn't mean wrong." Her mother squeezed her hand. "It means right found you when you weren't looking." A year later, Nina accepted the research position in Seattle. Her mother moved with her, into a house with a view of the water. Callum opened a satellite office there. They had dinner together most nights, sometimes just the two of them, sometimes with Nina's mother and Tyler, who had transferred to University of Washington. And 5 years after boarding the wrong plane, Nina walked down an aisle covered in white roses to marry the man who had taught her that wrong turns sometimes lead to exactly where you need to be. Claire was her maid of honor, of course. And in the front row, an empty chair held a single flower for Emma Sterling, who had been right all along. The universe always has a plan. Even when it looks like a mistake. The end.